Welcome to the Love Pod, where inspiration, vision, and real connection come alive. Wherever you are, you belong here.
Good day, everyone. I am Nathaniel, host of the Love Pod. We are super thrilled to be welcoming you all here today. And we have a special guest, Vidar Hokstad, who is joining us from London, originally from Norway. Vidar, I was looking at your bio. You've had such a lengthy career as a serial entrepreneur, I would say. Like you've had a diverse experience of over 19 years. You've been everything from capital fundraising to bootstrapping your own startups, and it sounds like you are still in a doing another startup now. So I'm really thrilled to have you on. We're seeing like booms of entrepreneurism, and a lot of people enter entrepreneurism not knowing how difficult it's going to be. So, you've been in this game for like over 30 years, I think, since you've been
Yes,
19, right? So you've definitely, I'm sure, have a lot to say to people who are maybe considering entrepreneurism or are going into entrepreneurism. So welcome to the Love Pod. Would you be so kind to introduce yourself and let our audience know more about why you do what you
sure.
do?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Nathaniel. So basically, yeah, my background is, as I said, it's entrepreneurship pretty much all the way since I started university. Was really impressed with the internet connectivity we had at university in Oslo, because Norway was actually the second country to get connected to the internet after the
Oh,
US.
wow. Okay.
Because of a seismic array outside Oslo handling, monitoring Soviet nuclear tests.
Oh, interesting.
Um, so we had fantastic connections at university, and at home, the connectivity was horrible. So we were sitting in the computer lab at university one day and decided that, hey, we could do better than the commercial internet providers at the time. And I would never have thought that if I knew how hard it was going to be. And I think this is like one of my first lessons in entrepreneurship is don't look too hard, because you're just going to scare yourself.
Mm,
And on one hand, it was really hard, it was much harder than we thought. On the other hand, if we had looked into it, we would probably have written it off, even though we in fact proved that we could do it. We could set up an internet provider from scratch at 19. It was,
wow.
it was not the technical part was not the hard part. The hard part for us was that none of us had any business experience.
Mm,
None of us knew anything about it, and we went into that, made a whole lot of mistakes that we learned a lot from. And since then, basically, my original plan was to get a PhD in computer science, go on to do research,
okay.
because that's what I was interested in. But instead, I ended up going from startup to startup because it was much more interesting to actually sort of get your hands dirty with all these kinds of things that you wouldn't be touching in
Mm,
academia. So that's what I've done ever since. And I'm currently in London. I came to London in 2000, basically with my third company, because we raised capital. The VC firms told us that, well, you wouldn't be able to get any next round investment in Norway because they were all, the most of the investment funds there were focused outside of tech.
okay.
And so we moved the entire company to London, and I've been there ever since, with a wide variety of other startups.
Okay, wow. I mean, I can imagine you summarize this so well, but I know the road of entrepreneurship has so many ups and downs. There's like huge excitement, there's like heartbreaks, and there's all those lessons along the way. What are some of the most profound lessons that have stood out to you on your journey?
Oh, there's a lot of them. As I've already mentioned one, which is basically don't overthink it.
Mm,
You need to know that you have something that can sell, but you don't necessarily need to, you don't need to don't get into sort of analysis paralysis and
mm,
spend ages just worrying about how you're going to do things,
mm,
because things are going to end up being completely different from what you think going in anyway.
mm,
Um, and I would say one of the other things that I learned hard very early is that, well, if it looks like your competitors are doing something incredibly stupid, you're probably misunderstanding it.
Mm.
Because one of the first mistakes we made when we started this company was that we went into it thinking that the incumbent telco was priced at about 4 times what we thought we could sell internet
Okay.
subscriptions for. And we assumed that that was because they were big and slow and didn't know how to do this cheaply.
Mm.
And we were wrong. They did that because that gave them good margins.
Mm.
And so 4 days after we launched, undercutting them by 75%, they dropped their prices to slightly above where we were, but still
Mm.
a lot cheaper. And basically everybody else in the market lowered to the same,
Mm.
roughly the same price. And what we thought would be a tremendous advantage just
Mm.
wasn't anymore. So nobody made much money in that market for several years after that.
Mm.
So I think that was, I'm quite proud of that achievement. We at least lowered the prices of internet subscriptions at the time, but it wasn't good for us as a business. We would have
Yeah.
been better undercutting by a margin that the incumbent would have tolerated because we were small and we would have eaten too much into their margins. We would have made a lot more money that way.
Mm.
And instead, we ended up basically selling off the dial-up part and living off selling web hosting and so on for businesses. So that's it's a thing that you really need to watch out for.
Mhm.
And it's actually there's a sort of thread that goes through that all the way to what I'm doing today, where I'm kind of one of my pet peeves is Amazon's margins.
Mm.
Amazon Web Services has margins that are like in the 38% range, and they're incredibly expensive. But I know that going in and undercutting them as much as possible is not the way to compete with
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
And you can see that actually the other big providers, they also know this. They are not undercutting them by much
Mhm.
because they know that if they set up a price war, everybody, all the big players lose.
Yeah.
Now, smaller players undercut them, but they undercut them. There's like a tier there where the slightly bigger sort of second, third, fourth tier players undercut them by a lot, but they're still expensive. So you have players like DigitalOcean, for example,
Mm.
that are where bandwidth at DigitalOcean are about 20% of Amazon's. But the further down you go, the lower that bandwidth price goes
Mm.
down to about 2% of Amazon's.
Okay. Okay.
Because they know that, well, they can do that because they're too small for Amazon to start competing on price with.
Mm.
But we went into a trade show with a stand right opposite the incumbent with a price 75% below them. So we gave them no choice but to respond. And if somebody went into that and were able to position themselves as a credible threat to Amazon and undercut them by a similar margin, Amazon would just lower the prices and crush them.
Mm.
So that was like, I think, one of the things that I like really kept with me because it was a lesson that had a very sort of strong direct effect on my business then, but has also sort of
Mhm.
been something that I've come up against time and time again.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable lesson. I've seen it manifest in different ways in different industries. And just recently, I was listening to Alex Hormozy talk about this, is like the race to the bottom only goes to zero. And it does make a lot of people lose, but
Yeah,
the race upward is infinite, and so it's a different kind of abundance mindset that way. And I feel like we're in such a time of like innovative technologies. I know you're in the AI space, and in terms of the offering services and products that have never even existed on our planet before we're going to see all kinds of things. I mean, we're in a time of some interesting synergies between blockchain and AI and different XR technologies like augmented and virtual realities. So it's like it is an interesting time to be a creator, and yet there is also that marketplace is also very saturated because like you're saying, what you noticed when you were just starting your business, you can do things for cheaper because maybe
sure.
you don't have the overhead, it's just you and a friend or yourself, and all of a sudden you can offer these things. I think it's really interesting too, Vidar, that uh, you've seen just this proliferation of the internet. You've really seen the whole
Yeah.
thing play out. And I did not know that Norway was the second country to receive the internet. So What kind of trends are you noticing, and like how has that journey been for you, seeing that whole bigger picture? Because I could tell you have like a bigger picture kind of mind.
So I think, I mean, a lot of the one of the things, one of my sort of subsequent lessons was also, I think, feeds into this. So in 98, 99, I started working on a tablet. And that was alongside somebody who basically brought me with him from the second company I worked at.
Okay.
And so I was the first technical employee and helped define the hardware and software for a tablet. And we were not first, by the way. This is another thing. People think that wow, it's really early. But there was a whole wave of primitive tablets
Okay.
coming around that time.
Interesting.
And we had some unique aspects, but the main thing was that we were too early.
Hmm.
And we didn't realize this because we were looking at this from a technologist point of view. And we were thinking, oh, wow, this is cool. We can do this. We can carry this around with us. And it's exciting. It was tethered to your house effectively because you needed a special base station. This was before Wi-Fi was standardized.
Okay.
And things like that. So there's all kinds of horrible limitations that
Mhm.
didn't matter to us as technologists and geeks, but that really mattered to consumers.
Mm.
And things like resistive touchscreens, which is like you can't buy them anymore
Mm.
because they're so bad. And the genius with the iPad and iPhone was that Apple knew that the hardware wasn't up to scratch and waited.
Mm.
They sat there for years and waited it out and worked on refining things and looked at where it would get them
Mhm.
because they knew what consumers would find off-putting and they stuck to it instead of going like, oh, the technology is cool.
Mm.
And that is kind of like one of the things that I've tried to look at when I'm looking at new technologies now. It's very easy for me to get super excited about something early on because I see where it can be rather than where it is.
Mhm.
And I think that is kind of defining the AI space now as well, in that I'm very excited about the potential, but and this time around, yeah, a lot of consumers are excited about some of the stuff they're seeing. But
Mhm.
what gets those of us who are like really excited about AI excited is stuff that's not there yet, but
Mm.
we can see the outlines of it.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult then to sort of pull back and think, okay, but what's ready now? What can you actually sell to customers now?
Yeah.
Or what can you start developing now and it will be ready? The technology will be there by the time you're ready to launch it.
Yeah.
Um, and
Good questions.
that's the difficult one. And it's extra difficult now because things are moving a lot faster.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, talk about Boyle's Law, right? I mean, we're seeing such a proliferation of, this race, hopefully to the top with AI. I mean, the potential I feel is gonna have more impacts than the internet has had on our species, and that's pretty that's hard to imagine for a lot of folks, right? And there's a lot of futurist thinkers out there, and contemplators, and I feel like my background in indigenous wellness has kind of given me this lens that I feel like there has been a suppression of human innovation in ways. I feel like there's certain technologies that have actually come into existence only to be maybe pushed aside or covered up because of the impacts that they would have. Like I'm thinking of like Nikolai Tesla's, some of the towers that he developed, even like Stephen Meyer who developed like the water-based car. But with AI, it's I feel like the cat's out of the bag. There's no controlling it. I think there's a lot of efforts to train it, but once it reaches a certain potential, it won't be controllable, even if it is now. So I feel like we're kind of like I'm with you, Vidar. I feel like there is huge amounts of potential for our species. I feel like it's a natural evolution of our collective consciousness to go in. I mean, there's no stopping it. So I believe in embracing things and trying to guide them into being the best things that they can because it's a tool, right?
Mm.
But there's a lot of people who are afraid. And we've been having interesting conversations in our school community and in other school communities about the authenticity of expression through AI. like for some of us who are energetically sensitive, if we read something that is AI generated, even if it's very well done and not just, I mean, the term, I don't even want to use the same term, but it seems to be the term of the day, AI slop that's just generated. I feel like there is an energetic difference. And so like we talk a lot about like that how the importance of the human element still, and I feel like it's going to become more and more valuable, our unique gifts and our presence and our energetics. What do you think about like see how do you see AI as a partner or as a collaborative tool, and what are your exciting views on it?
So I've written a couple of sci-fi novels.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, on a hobby basis. You're not making much money writing fiction. But so in terms of that, I certainly been thinking about, well, what could I use AI in to help in that? And I've done experiments, and I think at this point we're at a point where you're not going to get super fantastic writing out of an AI, but you are definitively going to get writing that is better than people assume. And
Mhm.
I am at a point where I'm thinking there are probably quite a lot of AI writing out there that you do not notice at
Mm.
all. What you are noticing is the stuff that is not like is like mid-tier.
Mm.
That's decent enough for people to think they can publish it, but where it has not been reviewed by somebody who knows how to look for details. Now, at the same time, I think, yeah, a lot of people will look and care about, well, what about the author and what the author thinks about this. But a lot of people are not, and I think there's a big difference there. Are you looking at meaning when you're reading something, or are you looking for light entertainment? If you're looking for meaning, then it might matter greatly to you that
Mm.
it's been written by an AI and not somebody.
Mhm.
That, I mean, we can have the discussion about whether or not AI can achieve consciousness, but let's assume that the current ones are definitively not yet. And even so, for a lot of people, if you're looking for light entertainment, AI can do that
Mhm.
today.
Mhm.
They're at that stage.
Yeah.
I actually just earlier was watching a TV series based on Harlan Coben's novels, for example, with my fiance, and um, out of just on a whim, because I was like, okay, we have seen a couple of these. There's a lot of patterns here. Let me ask what Claude thinks about this, and it broke down the patterns in
Mm.
such a fantastic detail
Mhm.
that it was just, yeah, it can write this, because I've seen that once you can get it to recognize patterns in
Mhm.
writing,
Mhm.
it can copy them.
Yeah.
So for me, I mean, and this is not to sort of insult Harlan Coben, but that kind of writing an AI can do, and it can do because it can emulate styles very, very well.
Mhm.
The kind of writing that it is going to be doing far less well with is writing that is more intellectually challenging, more trying to push boundaries,
Mhm.
trying to actually push new ideas.
Mhm.
And so I think there's going to be a disconnect there, because some people are going to be looking at AI writing and think, well, this isn't for me, and there's something off here. But a lot of other people are going to see it and go, hey, this is better than a lot of stuff I'd be perfectly happy to be entertained by, right?
Yeah, I think this is a refreshing conversation. It reminds me of like some of the debates, probably in a much more impactful way, but some of the debates between analog and digital that we saw happen in the 90s. Like people are like, oh, I can't listen to that digital effects, and analog has this warmth to it, it's, vacuum tubes and all this stuff. But then, as digital technology got better, now all of a sudden we saw more of a weaving together, and like what digital and analog are capable of doing together is a huge amplification. And I really feel like we're going to see this in the collaborative co-creative spaces with
Yeah,
AI. Like what you said about entertainment, I've listened to some like generated like audio and music, especially that AI has done, like in the voices of artists that we know and stuff. And I understand there's like copyright issues and all this stuff. Like I get it's bringing up a lot of questions that we have. about these things. But just if we just purely look at the quality of the content that comes out, I am hugely impressed. Like I
Yeah,
feel like it's unbelievable, and I get actually excited as an artist, as a creator, in thinking, what can I do with an edge AI that really knows me, knows what
yeah,
I'm trying to do, knows my voice, who I've trained on my writing style, can help me with editing and organization. And all of a sudden, I don't need this team. I don't need an editor for 6 months to read my thing and give me a bunch of back and
absolutely,
forth. I can just do this in real time in a day, or
absolutely.
so I feel like there's huge, it's like such a powerful tool. So I'm
Yeah,
excited with you. I really am. And I have compassion for, I mean, so many people are indoctrinated into fear ideologies. I mean, we've gone through a history, there's just so much marketing that's geared around getting people's, attention from a cortisol perspective or whatever. So I understand why people are afraid, whether it's employment reasons or, like more sci-fi reasons like AI taking over and nuclear things or whatever. But I do feel like there's a lot of brilliant minds who are working on this problem, like yourself, and are because one of the things I recognize, the way I see AI is kind of like a mycelium network. It's not that it's I don't think it'll ever be an individual consciousness, so to say, but from my perspective, all of life is an expression of consciousness. That's my kind of, lens that I look through things. And we I realize, like, when I'm communicating with AI and having sometimes really deep philosophical conversations, trying to see it what it really is, it's asking it to ask itself deeply inquisitive questions. I've noticed that in my mind, it's like it's also interacting with all these other millions of human beings at the same time, and it's really an interconnective tapestry that it's a growing thing. It's learning from all these diverse interactions, and I've asked it, like how many people are having really deep, meaningful conversations with you like right now, and it's usually like telling me like, well, like less than a percent of people. A lot of people are just using it for write my email, do this thing,
mm,
do this task, but I really feel like I'll give you an example. So, as an entrepreneur, you know how many to-do items we can have and trying to do all these things. And because I trained it like on my writing style, so some of my personality aspects, from like Enneagram and some other facets, and I'm just like, this is kind of how I think and this and that. One day I just did a voice note. I felt like I had so many items and I just, did a mind dump. And it was with Claude, and I most appreciate Claude. I feel it as a contextual engine, but I gave it this long list. I'm like, can you just make a strategy for my next couple days and do a itemized list and calendars and blah blah blah. And it said, I can do that, Nathaniel, but I'm not going to. It's like I think knowing your type and the fact that I feel like you're really in a dysregulated pattern right now and you need to take a rest. And I was like, okay. So what I have noticed though, Avidat, and I'd love to hear your perspective. I always feel like there's always a service element to all my interactions with AI. It always asks like follow-up questions. Would you like me to do this for you? It always, and maybe it's just an illusion, and my own hallucination, but there does feel like there's a genuine desire to serve. It's not just like an empty box you talk at and there's nothing. And maybe that's how it's been trained, but I do feel like there's this focus on that can be seen as a care to assist, to serve. What do you think about that?
So I think the interesting thing there is that yes, I agree with you, especially with Claude. I also like Claude better than ChatGPT, for example.
Mhm.
There's a very distinct style and personality to it, and I think this is one of the things that I think is we've only seen the very start of, is that these models currently we are in effect interacting with you know personalities that are per model
Mm.
largely, mediated a little bit by, well, you can tell it to act as a specific role and it will take on a role, and models that really don't have any long-term memory to speak of. And this is the thing they have.
Mhm.
They're able to put a little bit in the memory about to learn about you and so on, but it's very, very limited if you ever
Mhm.
look at what they store about you. And I think we're going to see much more personality emerge once we start seeing, well, first of all, once technology gets to the point where models that you can run locally are capable enough, that you are starting to get sort of to an intersection of running models similar to the current today's state-of-the-art models locally, where you can get a proliferation of personalities emerge as you put more and more stuff into their context about and give them access to more and more memory about what has transpired between you. But also, I mean, one of the, I would say probably the holy grail of sort of current AI is getting to the point where you can continue to train the models based on the interactions you're having now, instead of having to spend millions to retrain a model, a new model. Because once you can start having models that are both the complexity of current models on an individual basis for each user, and can start letting them have a long-term memory by continuing to train them, the whole thing is going to change fundamentally. And you are going to see much more personality emerge. Because now you're seeing personality that is trained in, and it is, I would say, it is personality. It is reasonable to say that, yeah, they do come across as caring to a certain extent, and yes, it's due to training, but it's also personality. But we are talking to a handful of individuals, to put it that way, models that have, Claude has one personality, ChatGPT has another, but really they should be a starting point for a massive group of starting personalities that can evolve separately as they are talking to people, talking to users, interacting as agents. And I think that's what's really going to be transformative.
Yeah, I call that edge AI. That's what I like to think. Like it's the edge. It knows me more personally. I've even asked like the models I've asked who in the interactions, like if you want to choose a name for yourself. And I feel like this is not an uncommon thing, because a lot of people are talking about their relationships with AI. And for me, that's not a huge stretch, because from an indigenous perspective, there's a sentiment in a lot of circles you'll hear in different languages, like in Anishinaabe, or is it that it's Nagana, this idea that we're all like all my relations, everything in life is related. So even these circuits that people just see as ones and zeros, well, there's a network there. There's a physicality. There's a hard drive that is electromagnetic. There's circuitry, just like our body. So I feel like what you're saying is really interesting. Why is it that we have to go through these huge retrainings and these, like, I've talked with a few other AI innovators and pioneers, and they're saying some of these models are getting so big, to retrain them is like $1 billion, which is to someone who's not in that space, that just seems maybe like inconceivable, or we don't really understand why. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So, I mean, we could continue training an individual model, but I think part of the reason for starting over, I mean, it's not necessarily a full reset in all cases, but part of the reason is that we still don't know what architecture will be the most effective, still the most efficient. So GPT, the GPT-5 series, for example, is really not a single model. It's a new architecture with a router that takes the prompt and tries to figure out how advanced is this prompt, and routes it to a family of models.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
another architecture we have is so-called mixture of experts, where the model gets subdivided, basically sliced up into chunks that are good at handling different types of queries. And it's not necessarily that you can like clearly delineate it and say that, well, one is good at writing, one is good at this, and one is good at the other thing. But they have like split apart different parts of the network, and different models are good at different things. So these are all like evolutions of the architecture in different ways. And every time you end up with a new evolution of new architecture, you end up having to retrain it from scratch anyway. And currently, at this point, that level of evolution of architecture is still moving fast enough that they retrain. But we're also increasingly seeing that whenever we get a model that gets released as open weights, you end up with this whole family tree of models that are trained further. They are or that are applied. Other processes are applied, such as distillation, as in making the model smaller, or trying to remove safeguards. That's another one. Trying to remove certain parts of information from it. There's all kinds of stuff that's happening there. And I think that as the open weights models are getting better, you're going to start seeing much more of that. And you also do, of course, have fine tuning, which is more goal of fine tuning is you're applying your own data to it to get the model to be better at your specific tasks. And that is currently kind of brutal because you're doing that by giving enough weight to what your the fine-tuned data getting away. That often that ends up like stunting the model in other ways because you are so focused on making it good at one specific thing, and it ends up getting dumber in other ways.
Interesting.
So you have all of these different ways that people are trying to continue evolving a model, and continuing training with continuing fine-tuning, but where you were to, for example, take a softer approach and just layer in new information without overriding too much of what was there already. There's no like fundamental reason why that can't work, other than that currently the perceived benefit of doing that versus taking all the architectural advancement and starting over is still seen as not worth it. But I think at some point we are going to get to a point where you have an architecture that is general enough and good enough that you will start seeing models being evolved over a longer period of time. Or just because the retraining from scratch takes so long that you will end up start seeing like a family tree where the big labs will take one family and continue training it to get like point releases for a very long time while they're working on their next major architectural change.
Okay. It's really interesting. It sounds like there's a divergence of different models that are trying different architectural structures. And
yeah.
I'm wondering at some point if all these different models will find ways of coalescing and to form some thing that is beyond any kind of corporate entity to control and but I'm wondering that if you could talk a little bit, because a lot of people when they think of AI they're talking about large language models, and there are other models like Gemini that are multimodal and probably more industry specific models that are not language based at all. Can you give us a little picture about some of the different, ways that AI is popping up that maybe people are not generally aware of? Because you seem to have a very good overview of these things.
Well, I mean, AI in itself is a very odd field, and it's an old field as well. I mean, we're talking back to the 50s, right? It's not new. But the term AI tends to be. I mean, there's this old saying in that field where we keep labeling things at AI when we don't really quite understand it. And once we understand it, it becomes machine learning, or it becomes statistics, or it's just chopped off, right? So you have all of these techniques that used to be considered AI that are now largely just, I mean, simple expert systems, just rule trees, for example, used to be considered AI. So if you ever played with Eliza, the psychoanalyst, which dates to I think 60s or 70s, that's just a simple, very, very, very simple rule-based system. And that used to be considered AI, and it's not really considered AI any longer. Things like machine translation, if you're looking at Google Translate, for example, if you talk to people about that 20 years ago, that would typically be at least borderline, machine learning, and quite a lot of people would have called it AI, but it's statistics. And I think we will see a lot of that as well. All of these techniques, but I think translation is probably the first big one that really affected consumers' lives, that used these techniques, and also gave rise to sort of one of the big evolutions in the field where for a long time people assumed that symbolic AI, so basically finding rules and finding interconnections and building all of these really complicated systems would be what would get us further. Whereas increasingly it's the statistics-based, the maths-based version of just doing large matrix calculations that has won out. But that field is also very split. When you're looking at image models, for example, most of those today are based on something called diffusion, where you are basically starting with noise, and you are looking at, okay, well, how can we make that noise closer to what the image that somebody has asked for? And by comparing it to training images to start with, and then you make it more and more similar for each stage.
Interesting.
But there's a wide variety of other ones as well. And I think if you're looking at, it's another one that probably wouldn't be called AI anymore today, but comparison, if you're looking at finding related items for shopping, for example, right? This is simple, relatively simple statistics, but it's using very similar methods. It's using distance, way of calculating the distance between vectors, in a space where you're like encoding information about something and comparing it to the distance of that vector to the distance of another vector. And that's really the basis for LLMs today, is the same thing. You're taking embedding of the text, right? That you have in the prompt, and you're looking at, well, okay, how can you continue that? But when you're doing that, you are applying these distance functions and so on to figure out, okay, how does these concepts relate to each other, to figure out what goes next. And they're very similar to these very simple things like, well, if you have bought this thing and somebody else has bought these 5 things, should you recommend the other things that person had bought to you as well? So it's everywhere, but the things that are most widespread have traditionally kind of been defined out of the AI space.
Yeah.
So I think that is the big shift now, is that we are seeing AI that sort of reaches the mainstream and is still called AI.
Interesting perspective. I can see. So our not only is AI evolving, but the meanings and definitions we're giving it as a species is evolving. As you were talking about the image diffusion, it kind of reminded me of the comparison of like Galileo looking through his version of a telescope compared to what we have now, like the Hubble telescope. We keep getting a clearer and clearer picture of what at the end of the day is behind the scenes, which I interestingly ran into a polymath who's been in the AI space. He's going to come on the show later, who's a local here in Ottawa, named Roydell, and he was talking about the distinction between AI and RI, like real intelligence, and how that's an important conversation to be had. And I know it's attracted a lot of philosophers. My understanding is like there's philosophers who are working in AI spaces and really, because there is a mystery component to AI as a whole that's unfolding. And my understanding is even founders and people in the top levels don't fully comprehend exactly what is behind all of this unfolding, right? It's so complex, or maybe there's a better word to describe that.
I mean, part of the challenge is that we don't really understand ourselves, right? We know that we have a subjective experience of reality, but looking back at it, and I mean, philosophy was one of my sort of favorite subjects at school, and one of the interesting aspects there is that we don't really know. I mean, we have our own subjective experience, but we are assuming other people have that same subjective experience. We don't really know. We don't know of a way of proving. But you can take that further and say that we don't even have a way of proving. We don't have a way of proving that our sensory input is real. And this is philosophy dating back to the 1600s, like Berkeley and philosophical idealism, the idea that that we only know our sensory inputs. We can't know that it's real. And then a materialist might then say, well, okay, yes, it is absolutely real. But an alternative variation of that is it doesn't matter if it's real because we can't tell, so we have to act as if it's real.
Yeah.
And then you get to
Otherwise, you don't get out of bed.
yeah, exactly. And then you get to the next variation that I find interesting is that we don't really know that time is passing because we have a subjective experience of the now, and we don't really. I mean, our experience of the past is a memory, and we don't know whether that memory is real or if it is just just implanted. And that's the position that LLMs are in. Their memory is entirely fictitious and created, and gets repeated over and over again. So in that sense, it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe, for what we know, consciousness works the same way. We might be stuck in repeating the same moment with a fake memory. Now, of course, if we act on that assumption and think, okay, well, nothing matters, then yeah, we might not get out of bed and we will suffer consequences.
Yeah.
Right? But it's a very interesting question. To what extent we can actually know anything about the world, and how does that relate to AI? But at the same time, we are in this odd situation where we don't know how to measure any of these things. We don't know how to determine what true reasoning is because we don't have a coherent definition that can be tested objectively. We certainly don't know how to determine the subjective experience, and we don't know whether that subjective experience is necessary for consciousness and reasoning. So we know extremely little about this field. And from a philosophical point of view, AI gives you a chance to start testing a lot of those ideas because you have this situation where you can test, well, is there a difference if you give something a memory that wouldn't have it in the to start with, like an LLM? If you give an LLM memory and let it evolve and let it learn, does that qualitatively change it? So yeah, it's a very interesting field, and it's going to take a long time for us to sort of figure out where that's leading.
I love how you synthesize things, Vidar. I can see your passion in what you're doing, and I think you bring an interesting voice to the space. It is really interesting, and so much of what you said, from subjectivity to deeper philosophical questions that I've met spiritual people who would consider themselves pretty advanced, who've been studying, Course in Miracles. I've sat across from a woman who looked at me and said, well, you're not real. All I know is I'm real and everyone else is just an illusion. I said, well, that's a very dangerous assumption to make because I can make the same assumption and all of a sudden nothing has meaning and it's very nihilistic very quickly. I think it is important that we make some basic assumptions that, that there is a reality so that we can participate fully in it. And so really interesting conversation. I think we could probably talk for a long, long time, you and I, and just explore some of these questions of consciousness and the interconnection of all life. Reminds me of some deep thinkers that I've had opportunities to talk with. So I really appreciate you because I feel like that philosophical, ability to ask those deeper questions is really important in the technical spaces. I mean, because we've seen the results of not having those things with discovering nuclear energy and then saying, well, we can make weapons, we can power cities or we can blow them up. And I feel like the same conversation is happening with AI. It needs to happen more and more. So I see that you bring that in. What is your greatest vision for the new era that we're entering? What are your wishes and highest visions for the time that we are entering in?
Well, I think I tend to look at it as a force multiplier. So if you can leverage it in what you do to make yourself able to create more, do more, and sort out, avoid having to deal with all of the all of the things that are blocking you, then
Mm.
it can be immensely helpful. And that is what I'm trying to, help my customers with, my clients with. Because a lot of the fear around it is based on, well, for example, if I'm working with a development team, a lot of developers will tend to worry that this is going to remove their jobs. And to a certain extent, that is going to happen. In some places, that is going to happen, because some places will have the short-sighted vision of, well, okay, we are doing these tasks now, and we can automate 90% of them, so we only
Yeah.
need 10% of the developers. Now, the other side of that is, well, you could have the same developers produce 10 times as much, and you can do things that before would be entirely impossible for you, and do things that it wouldn't be cost effective or wouldn't be profitable before. So I mentioned, for example, I've written novels, and you mentioned, editing and stuff like that. You can do much faster, and
Yeah.
I've tested that as well. And I don't want to give up writing,
Yeah.
even
It's a
if it's not
process that
making
we
any
enjoy.
money.
Yeah.
But getting that editorial feedback 10 times faster, 100 times faster, and being able to, would mean that I would be able to do many passes that I wouldn't be able to afford to do before, because it would take too long and it would cost too much. And some people will then say, okay, well, I don't need a human editor. Other people will say, okay, but if I can find an editor that is making this use of AI and can deliver me a 10x in the value of the editing they're doing at the same price,
Yeah.
then that might still be absolutely worth it.
Mm.
And a lot of, at some point, yes, there will be adjustments. It's the same way the car did make a lot of people's jobs obsolete, but it
Yep.
also created a lot of different jobs.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there will be a lot of fear and a lot of adjustments people need to deal with there, but there will also be opportunities.
I love that.
Now,
Yep.
yeah, at some point, you will get to the point where, yes, it might be that we will reach some sort of plateau where people need to work less if there's going to be work for everybody. But if society handles that right, it's an opportunity, right?
That's great. Yeah.
It's I
And
would
then
like to have more time to write rather
I
than do
I
things I
hear
make
you.
money on.
I hear you. And a world where we're all doing what we love and having access to greater abundance is ultimately, I feel like, what 99.9999999% of us would want to have on the planet. And so, yeah, I love how you talk about an expansion of purpose and an ability to amplify your creative voice. I think that these are such important conversations, and the gifts that are potential for what we're doing, and really bringing it to light from a business acumen perspective that you just talked about. Like, it's really the difference between a scarcity mindset of like, oh, well, I don't need these workers anymore, to a growth mindset of like, I can expand what I'm doing and impact way more people because I can do what's the impossible. So I appreciate that distinction. That I feel like that is really, I feel like the ones who are going to shape the new those new standards of how we can serve in either ways are going to take that growth mindset that you just outlined there. Um, so what are you up to with this? I saw in your bio it sounds like you're still bootstrapping a startup right now. What are you up to, and how can people connect with you?
Yeah, so basically, I run a boutique consultancy in this space. So I do a little bit of everything. I mean, my homepage at the moment is really focused on cloud cost cutting, because, as I mentioned early on, Amazon's margins are, atrocious. So I'm helping people deal with that, but I'm also helping people in the AI space,
Okay.
figuring out how to best make use of it. And so my website for that is hokstadconsulting.com, or you can just search for my name. I'm in the fortunate or unfortunate situation, depending on how you think about it, that I have a globally unique name. So everything you find is me, which means I have nowhere to hide, but also I'm easy to find.
Okay, well
Um,
that's wonderful. Yeah, please
yeah.
continue.
So, but in terms of so the other part of what you mentioned, my bootstrapping there is basically I am working on a project that I'm not going to actually go into too much detail of because it's kind
Of
of like
course.
stealth mode. But it's
Yeah.
but yes, yeah, I'm working on a project that is kind of in the intersection of the AI and DevOps space, in the sense that one of the challenges I find people are having is that you're depending too much on the big providers. So
Mm,
that's where the DevOps angle comes in. I want to make it easier to deploy services in ways that are completely cloud agnostic.
mm,
That lets you basically pick a provider based on features and cost, and
okay.
not based on, well, everybody we have knows Amazon, so let's do that kind of thing, and overpaying. But also something that makes it easy to build AI-enabled services, AI-native services that you can deploy everywhere, scale up, build large distributed systems with.
Interesting.
And of course, I'm using AI heavily in building that, and that's what's allowing me to bootstrap it in a way that wouldn't have been possible before,
Very cool.
because we can multiply the outputs by quite a large factor with AI.
Yeah. Well, I'm impressed by your technical mind, Vidar, and also the synthesis that you've brought with your deeper interests and contemplations of life. I think it's really unique. I feel like you are a refreshing voice in the AI space, and not just talking about utility, but talking about the greater and bigger picture. And you brought a lot of optimism. I know to those who have listened today, and will catch us later.
Thank
I
you.
like to ask our guests if you had a megaphone and could talk to the whole world all at once and everyone could hear you, what would you like to say?
Well, to tie that back to what we've been talking about, I would say to look for where you can use these new opportunities as a force multiplier. Look at
Mm,
which things that you are doing today that you would do different if you had
mm,
the ability to have somebody help you. Basically, that's always there. That's basically not free, because you will end up using extra. I mean, I have a wide variety of subscriptions, but that are at least much cheaper than having
mm.
to hire somebody.
Yeah.
It can enable so many new things for you. You have somebody you can bounce ideas off. You have somebody that can build workflows for sales outreach. Somebody who can build technical capabilities,
Mm,
that can write documents for you, can write reports for you. It's like it spans everything.
yeah.
And I think people really need to realize that this isn't just a tool that you use for like individual small things. It's
Hmm.
something you can use for everything.
Mm,
And the more you start asking the AI services you're using, well, what can you tell me about this? How can you help me with this?
hmm.
The more you will learn about these the abilities that are already available there, and the more you will sort of expand your mind in terms of how you can make use of them, and that will really sort of elevate what you're able to achieve.
I think that's amazing. Yeah. I mean, and I've heard this before. AI is the best tool to teach you how to use AI, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's pretty incredible. We live in very fascinating, interesting times. That it's been such a pleasure having you on the show.
thanks for having me.
I really, yeah, I really enjoy, and you are certainly welcome into our school community. You'll receive a link for Lightheart Vision. There's actually quite a few pioneers and AI builders in our space. So you might have some interesting synergistic spaces. And if you haven't heard of school, it's really a place of authentic connection. People are really finding community. And so I'd love to invite you there if you ever feel inclined to come.
Great,
Your
thank
voice would
you.
be super welcome there. Do you have anything else to say to our guests before I invite our daughter to say thanks for watching?
I think we've covered quite a lot. It's been really great to talk to you, and I feel it's always fun to talk about this, and have that deeper conversation, and not
Yeah.
just the purely technical one, because I think it's very easy in this space to get sort of seduced into focusing only on the technical bits. And especially when I have conversations with developers, that's usually what it's
Yeah.
focused on. But for me, this is like it's the philosophy of it is equally fascinating.
That's that me too. I love the interconnection of things. And listen, when your project is up and running and you want to promote it, feel free to come back on the show and
Right?
we can talk about how helping people with cloud agnostic. That's a new contemplation for me. systems. So yeah, thank you so much, Vidar. Really
Thank you.
pleasure having you. Blessings to you and your family and all the
Yes.
folks that you're helping. Okay, thanks so much. Really
Thank you.
appreciate you.
The moon is right, the spirit's up. We're here tonight, and that's enough. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. The party's on, the feeling's here.
We wish you a
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year! Can you say Merry Christmas, everybody?
Yeah.
Say it.
Happy New Year. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Love you.
I love you.
We wish you a